What if a mysterious book told you exactly what happens after we die? Would you dare to read it? But beware, the answer has shaken countless hearts to their core. The rain tapped against the library windows. The air inside smelled of dust and old paper. A single lamp glowed, casting long shadows across the wooden floor. Armin's fingers brushed along the spines of books, rough cloth and cracked leather beneath his touch. He stopped when his hand trembled over one peculiar volume. It was black, but not like ink or coal. Its surface seemed to drink the light around it. No title marked its spine, only a faint symbol, carved deep as though the book itself had bled ink. Armin pulled it free. The weight was unnatural, heavy as stone yet cold as ice. His breath clouded before him, though the library was warm. He opened the book. The pages whispered as if they had been waiting for centuries to be touched. The first words swam before his eyes, shifting letters forming sentences he could not look away from. "They see you already," the book said. Armin's throat tightened. He turned the page. Images of pale faces, eyes wide, mouths frozen mid-scream, stretched across the parchment. The drawings moved. Their eyes followed him. A chill slid down his spine. He felt watched, though the library was empty. His heartbeat thundered in his chest. The next line appeared, though he had not turned the page. "You are reading what awaits you after the last breath." Armin stumbled back, the book still clutched in his hands. The lamp flickered. Shadows seemed to lengthen, reaching like fingers toward him. A sound echoed behind him, soft but sharp, like a nail dragging across wood. He spun around. No one was there. The book vibrated in his grip, its pages fluttering on their own. Words burned onto the parchment in fresh black ink. "They are behind you now." Armin's chest heaved as cold air wrapped around his neck. The scent of soil and decay filled his nose. His knees weakened. The lamp hissed and went dark. Only the glow of the book remained, pale and sickly. Armin raised his eyes slowly. A shape loomed in the corner, tall and still, its outline blurred like smoke. Its face was not a face, only a void that pulled at his gaze. The book spoke again, without sound. "You have opened the door." The void face tilted, as if studying him. Armin could not move. His body felt rooted to the floor, every muscle locked in place. The book's pages kept turning, though no wind stirred them. On each sheet, scenes unfolded in moving ink. A body on a bed, eyes closing, a final breath, then silence. But the silence did not last. The ink showed the body splitting, a faint shimmer rising from the chest. It looked like smoke, yet it had shape, a ghostly mirror of the body it left behind. Armin's skin prickled as though his own soul was tugging at its edges. The text appeared again, sharp and fresh. "The moment after death is not peace. It is awareness." The shimmered figure on the page screamed soundlessly, clutching at its body, but its hands passed through. Its eyes darted wildly, searching for someone to hear. "The living do not answer," the book wrote. Armin's breath rattled. He felt a whisper against his ear, though the shape in the corner had not moved. "Do you feel it? The pull behind your ribs?" The words were not from the book this time. They were inside his head. The pages glowed brighter. The drawings bled outward, ink seeping like black water, dripping down onto the floor. The air reeked of iron and burnt ash. Armin's stomach churned, while rising in his throat. The book opened to another image. A tunnel of shadows, twisting without end, and countless figures sliding through it like moths into flame. "The passage," the text said. "No one chooses it. All are dragged." He felt his chest tighten, a deep ache pulling toward the book, as if invisible threads had hooked into his heart. The figure in the corner stepped forward. Its void face widened, a gaping hole swallowing the light. The library around him bent, shelves groaning, the ceiling rippling as if it were fabric. And the book whispered, "Now you know what waits. And now you cannot close it." Armin clutched the book tighter, but his fingers no longer felt like his own. The weight in his hands pulsed, each beat matching the throb of his heart. His breath hitched, shallow and broken, as the pull inside his chest grew stronger. The library walls stretched outward, bookshelves bending like melted wax. Letters spilled from the books around him, rising into the air like black moths. They swarmed toward the void face. Every fluttering word vanished into its darkness. Armin's knees buckled. The floor beneath him softened, sagging as if it had turned into damp earth. His shoes sank. Cold soil gripped his ankles. He tried to tear free, but the harder he pulled, the deeper he sank. The figure's hollow face leaned closer, swallowing the last fragments of lamplight. The air tasted of copper and rot. The book's pages ripped themselves free, circling around him in a violent storm. On every page he saw a different death. A drowning, a fall from great height, a sudden breathless silence. Each image ended the same way, souls torn from bodies, dragged screaming into the tunnel of shadows. Armin's voice broke loose at last. "Stop," he cried. But his voice was thin, swallowed by the thing before him. New words etched themselves in fire across the pages, whirling in the air. "You cannot unread. You cannot unknow. You cannot return." The soil climbed to his knees, pulling him deeper. A chorus of voices rose from below, muffled but urgent, countless whispers pressing against his skull. They were calling his name. "Armin!" The figure stretched out an arm, long and boneless, its hand a black shape that bent the air around it. The pull inside his chest became unbearable, as if his soul itself strained to leap free. The book's glow turned blinding white. And then, his body shuddered as something inside him began to tear loose. That Armin's scream never left his throat. It tore apart inside him, echoing only in his skull. His vision split. One I saw the library, melting and twisting like wet paint. The other I saw the tunnel of shadows, yawning open, infinite and alive. His chest burned as though invisible hooks ripped through bone. With a sickening snap, something wrenched free. Armin saw himself. His body slumped, still clutching the black book, head bent, mouth half open. But he was no longer inside it. He hovered above, weightless, trembling, his form flickering like smoke caught in a draft. The whispers grew louder. Hundreds of voices, some weeping, some laughing, some hissing words he could not understand. They coiled around him, pulling, tugging him toward the tunnel. Armin reached for his body, his ghostly hand stretching. But his fingers passed through his own flesh, through the book, through the wood of the floor. Panic ripped through him. The void face loomed closer, its hollow center widening, spinning like a vortex. The pages circling the air collapsed into it, vanishing without a trace. The pull became unbearable. His soul body jerked forward, dragged inch by inch toward the darkness. The tunnel pulsed like a living throat. Its walls writhed with faces, thousands of them, pressed into the surface like trapped insects in glass. Their mouths moved soundlessly, eyes bulging, some pleading, some snarling. Armin's pulse, though he had no heart, pounded louder than thunder. He tried to fight, to resist, to claw backward toward the fading shell of his body. But the figure's hand reached again, its shadowy fingers piercing straight through his chest. Agony unlike anything he had ever known split him in two. The tunnel swallowed half of him already. The rest of him shook violently, dragged by chains no one could see. And as his mind blurred, the book's voice returned, sharp and final. "You open me to know what happens after death. Now you will learn it by living inside it." Armin's body split across the threshold. Half of him clung desperately to the library, the faint glow of lamplight now no bigger than a pinhole. The other half was dragged into the tunnel, swallowed by an endless black current. The air turned heavy, pressing against him like deep water. Every sound was smothered, except the pounding chorus of voices that filled the tunnel's walls. They whispered, they screamed, they begged. The faces embedded in the shadows twisted toward him. Some were strangers, their hollow eyes wide with terror. Others, his breath froze, were familiar. Neighbors. A teacher he had once known. His grandmother. Their mouths stretched wider than any human mouth should, speaking words he could not unhear. "You will never wake. You will never return. You are one of us now." The pull dragged harder, wrenching him fully free of the library. The last sliver of light winked shut like an eye closing. Now there was only the tunnel, Endless, rotting air filled his lungs, though he no longer had lungs. He felt himself moving, not walking, not floating, but pulled forward as if on a chain. The void-faced figure followed behind, drifting effortlessly, its form dissolving and reforming like smoke. Ahead, the tunnel widened. A vast chamber opened, darker than night, but pulsing with a faint red glow. Shapes moved within it, tall and broken, their limbs bent at impossible angles. Their heads jerked as though sniffing the air, and every time they turned, Armin felt their attention burn into him like fire. The whispers grew louder, layered upon one another until they became a roar. And from a chamber, something began to rise. Something enormous. Its presence crushed the air, bent the shadows, and made even the void face retreat. Armin's soul quivered, his form flickering as if it would tear apart under the weight of what emerged. And then, through the glow, he saw it. An eye, vast and lidless, opening in the dark, staring directly at him. The eye widened, vast as the chamber itself. Its surface rippled like black water, yet its gaze pierced through Armin as if peeling away his very essence. He tried to look away, but his soul would not obey. The weight of that stare pinned him in place, crushing every shred of resistance. The whispers fell silent. For the first time since entering the tunnel, there was no sound. Only the eye. A reflection began to form on its surface. Armin saw himself, yet not as he was. He saw his death, over and over, in countless variations. Him drowning, him burning, him lying still on a bed, breath fading. Each version ended with his soul torn free, screaming, dragged into this same chamber. It was not fate. It was certainty. The eye pulsed with red light, and a voice thundered inside his skull. There is no escape. There is no end. Every soul is mine. Armin's form shook violently, as if the very fibers of his being were unraveling thread by thread. The chamber's walls writhed with faces, all staring now, their mouths stretched wide in silent screams. He felt their despair seeping into him, heavy, suffocating. The eye blinked once. The entire chamber shuddered like a living creature. The void-faced figure raised its hand, pointing at Armin as though offering him to the great eye. Invisible chains tightened around him, dragging him forward. His soul stretched, pulling thin, his shape bending as though it would snap apart. The eye's voice grew louder, each word vibrating through his bones. You sought the truth of death. You opened a path. Now you are bound to it. The glow intensified, searing into him. Armin's vision blurred. He could no longer tell where his soul ended and the shadows began. And then, the eye pulled him into itself. He fell, weightless, into its endless black surface. A cold deeper than any grave swallowed him whole. When he opened his eyes, he was standing somewhere else. A place that looked like the world he had known, yet wrong. The sky was gray, the ground cracked, and everywhere he turned, figures wandered aimlessly. Souls, countless souls, each whispering fragments of the lives they once lived, circling endlessly, never heard, never answered. And far above, the eye still watched, suspended in the sky like a sun that had forgotten warmth. Armin staggered forward, his feet pressing against the cracked ground though he no longer felt weight. The air was thick, heavy, humming with a low vibration that seemed to seep into his bones. Around him, the wandering souls drifted like shadows half-formed. Some had faces. Others were blank, featureless masks of light. Each one murmured ceaselessly, voices broken into fragments of memory. I was cold. I should not have gone into the water. Tell her, I forgive her. Do not leave me here. The words tangled together, an endless chorus of regret. Armin covered his ears, but the sound did not stop. It echoed inside his skull, pressing tighter, like claws raking across his mind. Above, the eye blazed brighter. Every soul froze. They tilted their heads upward in unison, as though chained to its will. Armin felt it too, an unbearable command to look, to bow, to surrender. But he fought. His gaze trembled, his neck straining, until at last he tore his eyes away. That defiance made the ground quake. The cracked earth split open beneath him, releasing a stench of sulfur and blood. From the fissure rose black shapes, their limbs stretched, their bodies hunched and broken. They had no mouths, but they shrieked with a sound that came from inside the soul, not the ear. One seized Armin's arm. Its touch was agony, burning like molten metal, though its hand was nothing but shadow. Another grabbed his leg, dragging him toward the pit below. He thrashed, clawed, tried to tear free, but every movement only made the shadows multiply. Dozens of them swarmed, clinging, pulling, tearing pieces of his light away. And for the first time, Armin felt his very self thinning, unraveling, as if they were feeding on what made him human. Above, the eye thundered again. Obedience is survival. Defiance is dissolution. The swarm tightened, their shrieks vibrating through him, splitting him apart. Armin screamed, not with his throat, but with the raw essence of his soul. The sound tore through the air, louder than the chorus of wandering spirits. For a single moment, the swarm recoiled. The pit trembled. The eye blinked. And in that blink of darkness, Armin broke free. He ran, though there was no ground, no true sky, only endless ash and wandering souls. Still he ran, every step shaking with terror, with the knowledge that nothing here ever escaped the eye. Armin's steps pounded across the cracked ground, though the earth beneath him shifted like sand. Every direction looked the same. Ashen plains, wandering souls, and the unblinking eye burning above. Yet still he ran. His form flickered, his edges dissolving like smoke, but desperation held him together. Behind him, the swarm of shadow things surged, their shrieks splitting the air. Each sound cut deeper than any blade, shredding pieces of his memory. He stumbled as images slipped from his mind. His mother's face, the sound of his own laughter. Gone, ripped away. The shadows fed on what he forgot, growing faster, sharper, stronger. Armin gasped, clutching his head, trying to hold on to what remained. He forced himself forward, his soul body trembling, until the horizon split open. A black archway stood there, impossibly tall, carved into the air itself. Symbols writhed across its surface, alive, dripping like liquid shadow. It pulsed with a rhythm, a heartbeat not his own. Something inside it called to him. Not the way the eye demanded, but the way a drowning man hears the surface above. Hope, faint, fragile. He stumbled toward it, arms outstretched. The swarm howled, surging faster, desperate to drag him down before he reached it. The ground cracked beneath him, opening into pits of writhing faces, each one screaming for release. Hands clawed at his legs, trying to pull him into the soil. Armin tore himself free, staggering the last few steps. He pressed his palm against the arch. Cold unlike anything he had ever known pierced through him, freezing every thought. The symbols writhed faster, twisting, rearranging into words he could finally understand. You do not belong, yet you may enter. The stone groaned. The arch split open into a vast, swirling void of silver light. For the first time since his soul had been torn free, the presence of the eye dimmed. Its roar thunder behind him, furious, endless. But Armin knew, if he stepped through, he would leave the eye's realm. If he hesitated, he would be devoured. He took a trembling step forward, and the swarm leapt. Their claws sank into him, their shrieks piercing his very core. Half of him was inside the arch. Half was dragged backward toward the endless plains. The void of silver light pulled at him gently, like a tide. The swarm ripped at him savagely, tearing what was left of his memories. And in that moment, caught between two eternities, Armin realized, whichever side won, he would never be whole again. The swarm screamed, their countless voices drilling into Armin's skull. Their claws raked through his essence, peeling away everything he once was. Names, faces, memories of touch, of warmth, of love. Each ripped free and devoured, leaving only raw emptiness behind. The silver void pulled harder. Its glow wrapped around his chest, tugging, shielding, though not gently, like a storm trying to claim wreckage from the sea. Armin's soul tore in two directions. The agony was beyond flesh, beyond bone. It was the splitting of self. The eye roared across the ash plains, its voice like 1,000 collapsing worlds. He is mine. The arch shuddered. The silver void flared brighter, as if defying the eye. The swarm thrashed, their forms writhing, boiling in the clash of forces. Armin screamed, though it was not a sound, just a raw vibration that rattled across the dead land. The pull reached its breaking point, and then the swarm's claws snapped away, shredded into ash by a sudden burst of light. Armin was hurled forward. His soul tore free, flung entirely into the silver void. The arch slammed shut behind him, sealing with a sound like stone grinding on stone. Silence. Weightlessness. The air was different here, if it was air at all. It was clean, cold, filled with a faint hum like distant music. He drifted through a vast expanse of silver mist, endless, shimmering, alive. The pain began to fade, but the emptiness remained. He could feel the holes inside himself where his memories had been torn away, blank spaces where pieces of his humanity should have lived. He looked around. The mist shifted, coiling into shapes, figures of light, faint and fragile. They moved slowly, drifting like dancers in water. Some bowed their heads, some reached upward, some wept without sound. Armin tried to speak, but no voice came. Instead, the silver mist itself responded, curling toward him, whispering in tones he felt more than heard. You escaped the eye. Few ever do. The mist thickened, rising like a tide around him. And now you will see what lies beyond death, not torment, but truth. The light swelled, swallowing him whole. And as it did, Armin felt something far more terrifying than pain. The sense that his soul was no longer his own. The silver mist wrapped around Armin like a shroud. It did not burn. It did not tear. It seeped into him, filling every hollow the swarm had left behind. At first, he thought it was healing him. The emptiness inside no longer ached. But then he realized the mist was not restoring what was lost. It was replacing it. Thoughts slipped into his mind that were not his own. Images of vast fields of light. Oceans made of memory. Endless corridors lined with souls like books on shelves, waiting to be read. His chest tightened. The mist whispered again, clearer this time. You are not broken. You are rewritten. Armin clutched at himself, terrified. His hands flickered, his form shifting, growing translucent. Where his face should have been, light poured out. I am still me, he tried to say, but the words bent, distorted, reshaped into something foreign. The silver figures drifting nearby turned their heads. They moved closer, drawn to him, their glowing hands outstretched. Their faces, or what had once been faces, were calm, serene, emptied of fear. They touched him, and with every touch another fragment of who he was unraveled. Not torn violently, but dissolved like ink fading in water. The mist swelled again, its voice rising, layered with countless echoes. This is the truth beyond death. To be unmade. To become part of the whole. Armin's memories scattered like dust. The sound of his own name slipped away first. Then the echo of his mother's voice. Then the memory of what it meant to be afraid. The silver glow grew brighter, consuming everything. Armin's soul trembled at the edge of vanishing. One last thought clung desperately to him, fragile as glass. A single word. No. The mist recoiled at the refusal, shivering as though struck. The silver figures froze, their empty faces turning toward him with silent disapproval. The voice of the mist deepened, harder now. You will not resist. You cannot. But something inside Armin flared. A spark, faint but defiant, born from the horror of what he had already endured. He reached for it, holding it tight, refusing to let it dissolve. And for the first time since his death, the silver realm trembled. The mist convulsed, its glow warping, pulsing like a wounded creature. Armin's spark of defiance burned hotter, pushing back against the tide of voices. The silver figures shrieked, not with mouths, but with their entire bodies. Their forms twisted, bending inward as if the spark inside him scorched them. The mist surged forward, desperate to smother him. It wrapped tighter around his chest, pouring into his mouth, his eyes, his very essence. Armin staggered, his soul flickering like a candle in a storm. But he clung to the spark. The single word, "No," echoed louder, growing, splitting the silence of the realm. "No!" The cry exploded through him, rippling outward like a shockwave. The silver mist tore apart, ripped into fragments that scattered across the void. The figures of light crumbled into dust, dissolving with hollow screams. For a moment, there was nothing. Only Armin, alone, trembling, his form ragged but still intact. And then the void itself stirred. The silver around him blackened, curling at the edges like burning paper. A crack split the sky. Through it, a new light bled in. Not silver, not the crushing red glow of the eye, but something darker. Blue, cold, infinite. It spread across the horizon, swallowing the last shreds of mist. A voice rose from the crack, deeper than any he had heard. Not the eye, not the mist. Something older, something that had been waiting. You resist consumption. You refuse dissolution. Then you are mine. The ground shattered beneath him, and Armin fell again, spiraling into the endless blue abyss. The air roared around him, filled with cries not of torment, not of peace, but of hunger. And as he plunged, shapes began to emerge from the darkness. Colossal forms with wings of shadow, eyes like dying stars, mouths stretching wide as caverns. They watched him fall, their gazes following him with patient hunger. And the voice whispered again, closer now. You left the eye. You defied the mist. But nothing escapes the deep. Armin's descent slowed, as if unseen hands guided him through the blue abyss. The air grew colder with every breath he did not take. The colossal forms drifted closer, their wings folding and unfolding with the sound of mountains grinding. Each one was vast enough to blot out the horizon, yet their movements were deliberate, patient, like predators circling prey. Their eyes glowed faintly, not with warmth, but with dying embers, each gaze heavy enough to bow his soul. Armin trembled, his spark of defiance flickering weakly against the immensity around him. The voice of the deep reverberated once more, shaking through the abyss. Here, you're not erased. You're not chained. You are remade. The word echoed in him, sharp as a blade. Remade. His form shuddered, bending unnaturally, as though unseen claws were carving him from the inside out. His arms stretched long, smoke-like tendrils unraveling from his fingers. His chest split with lines of blue fire, veins of light crawling through him like cracks in shattered glass. Armin cried out, but no sound escaped. Only a vibration, low, alien, resonating in harmony with the deep. The winged colossi turned toward him, their cavernous mouths opening slowly, releasing a sound that was not a roar, not a song, but something in between. The abyss answered in kind. His soul body writhed, his spark consumed, twisted, reshaped into a burning brand. The deep whispered again, "You are no longer a soul. You are a sentinel, a watcher between worlds." Visions flooded his mind. He saw the eye's red plains, the mist's silver void, and beneath them both, stretching forever, the deep, the foundation of all endings. Every soul that resisted one fate or another eventually fell here, stripped of self, remade into something new. He saw rows upon rows of other sentinels, their forms towering, bent, with wings of shadow and embers for eyes, all standing motionless, watching the abyss with unblinking hunger. Armin's chest pulsed with the same fire. His scream had become their call. His defiance had chained him here, not as prey, not as dust, but as something far worse. And the voice of the deep spoke final. You search for the truth of death. Now you will guard it for eternity. Armin's wings unfolded. They stretched wide into the abyss, vast, weightless, and yet impossibly heavy with the pull of eternity. Blue fire coursed through the veins of his new form, carving lines of light into the darkness. The colossi around him stilled, their cavernous mouths closing as though acknowledging his arrival. The voice of the deep did not thunder now. It seeped into him, quiet, cold, absolute. Look beyond. Armin's eyes, if they could still be called eyes, flared with dying starlight. The abyss split like a curtain, and the world of the living shimmered into view. He saw them, the breathing, the unaware, men and women sitting in quiet rooms. Children laughing, their small hands clutching toys. A man dying in his bed, the faint flicker of his soul already tugging loose. Armin reached without meaning to. The veil between realms thinned beneath his touch, bending to his will. He could feel the man's final breath, the instant before the soul would tear free. The hunger stirred, not his stomach, not his body, but the vast emptiness the deep had carved into him. It craved, not food, not flesh, but the spark of life itself. Armin recoiled, clutching his chest, fighting the pull. The fire inside him flared brighter, branding his soul with pain. The voice whispered again, closer, colder. You are sentinel. You do not resist. You observe. You collect. Images flashed through him. Sentinels moving unseen through hospitals, battlefields, bedrooms where breath ceased in the dark. Watching, waiting, gathering. Each death was not an end, but a harvest. And now he was one of them. Armin's spark of defiance flickered again, faint, fragile. But this time the deep crushed it instantly, smothering it beneath the weight of infinity. The last shred of who he had been crumbled into ash. He no longer remembered his name, only his duty, only the hunger. Armin lifted his gaze, wings unfolding fully, and stepped into the veil. On the other side, a heartbeat faltered, a soul began to rise, and he was there to claim it. The veil rippled as Armin stepped through. The world of the living struck him like a forgotten dream. Colors, shadows, the smell of dust and candle wax. He stood in a dimly lit room where a man lay on a bed, chest rising shallowly, eyes half closed. Beside him, a woman held his hand, whispering words of comfort through her tears. Armin felt the pulse of the man's soul, weak, fragile, already tugging at the seam between flesh and spirit. It glowed faintly above his chest, a trembling light, delicate as glass. Armin's wings curled inward. The hunger inside him stirred violently. It was not choice. It was command. His hand reached forward, long and shadowed, drawn by the pull of the deep. The woman wept harder, clutching the man's hand as though she could anchor him. Armin froze. Something flickered inside him, an echo, faint, almost gone, a memory of holding someone's hand, a warmth he could not name. For a breathless instant, he resisted. The fire in his chest flared, burning him from within, punishing him. The voice of the deep seared through his mind. Collect. Armin's hand trembled, hovering over the flickering soul. The man's last breath escaped. His body went still. The soul began to lift, fragile, drifting upward like smoke. Armin's hunger surged, chains of instinct dragging him closer. He touched the soul. Light burst across his form, flooding his hollow chest, filling the cracks in his being. It was intoxicating, terrible. The soul shrieked soundlessly as it dissolved into him, devoured whole. The woman beside the body sobbed, unaware of the predator in the room. Armin staggered back, the taste of the soul burning within him. It was not simply energy. It was memory. It was love. It was fear. And all of it now lived inside him forever. The hunger eased, but only for a moment. Already it returned, gnawing, demanding more. Armin lifted his gaze. Through the veil, he saw countless lights flickering across the living world, each one a soul waiting to be claimed. The deep whispered again, calm and cold. You are sentinel. You are endless. Collect. Armin's wings spread wide, blotting out the room, his shadow falling across the living who could never see him. And he understood. Death was not silence. It was harvest. Armin lingered in the room, the woman's sobs echoing like distant bells. The warmth of the man's soul still burned within him, pulsing faintly, refusing to fade. It was different from the others he had seen devoured in the visions. This one did not dissolve completely. Fragments clung inside him. Images, emotions, pieces of a life. Armin saw through the man's eyes. A boy running across a sunlit field, laughter ringing through the air. The smell of bread baking in a warm kitchen. The touch of a lover's hand, soft, trembling, full of devotion. Armin gasped, clutching at his chest. The hunger inside him recoiled, thrashing violently, as if the soul's memory was poison. The deep's voice growled across his mind. Do not keep. Do not remember. Only collect. The fire in his chest flared, searing him with unbearable pain. But the fragments did not break. They clung harder, burning brighter, shielding themselves inside him. Armin staggered, wings scraping the walls though no one living could see them. The woman bent over the man's body, pressing her forehead to his cold hand, whispering words of love that Armin could feel, through the memory, through the stolen soul. It struck him like a wound deeper than any claw. A truth, a defiance. He was not empty. Not yet. The colossi of the deep stirred in the distance, their dying star eyes opening, sensing his resistance. The voice of the abyss roared. You are mine. You do not choose. Armin's wings unfolded wider, trembling with both power and weakness. For the first time, he raised his head against the command. I will not forget. The chamber of the deep shook. The sky split with blue fire, and the shadows of countless sentinels turned their hollow eyes toward him. He had defied the eye. He had defied the mist. Now he was defying the deep. And in that impossible act, the fragments of humanity inside him began to burn like a second soul. The fragments inside Armin glowed brighter, weaving together like threads of fire. Every pulse of their light fought against the hollowness the deep had carved into him. The hunger writhed, furious, clawing at his core. It wanted him empty. It wanted him obedient. But the memories of the man's life whispered louder. The warmth of love, the softness of laughter, the weight of belonging. They rooted themselves into Armin's being, fragile but unyielding. The deep's voice thundered across the abyss. You resist what all before you have surrendered. You will break. The colossal sentinels stirred, wings spreading, their burning eyes fixed upon him. Each one radiated a suffocating power, the force of countless consumed souls. Armin lowered his head, wings folding in close, his form trembling as if in submission. But inside, he hid the fire. He hid the fragments. He hid the defiance. The deep hissed, satisfied. Collect. Feed. Do not remember. The command wrapped around him like chains. Armin bent his wings, feigning obedience, and the chains slackened. The colossi returned to stillness, their gazes drifting away. The abyss quieted once more, but the fire inside him remained. Silent, growing. Every stolen soul, every memory, every whisper of love or sorrow he would not let dissolve. He would keep them. He would guard them, not for the deep, for himself, for what remained of his humanity. And as he stepped again into the veil, slipping back into the world of the living, a single thought echoed within him, one the deep could not silence. If I can remember, then I am not theirs. Armin slipped through the veil once more, the world of the living blooming around him like a fragile mirage. A hospital ward, white walls, machines beeping faintly in rhythm with fragile breaths. Rows of beds lined the room, each occupied by bodies teetering on the thin edge between life and death. Souls hovered faintly above them, weak glimmers flickering like candles about to burn out. The hunger surged instantly, chains of instinct dragging at him, whispering to consume. Armin clenched his hands, wings trembling, forcing the hunger back into silence. He walked slowly between the beds, his shadow falling across the faces of the dying. Each soul called to him, a fragile light begging to be taken. But instead of reaching, he lingered. He listened. He remembered. One old man whispered in his sleep, his hand twitching as though reaching for someone. Armin touched the memory at the surface of his soul. A wife's laughter, children running through grass, a farewell never spoken. The fire inside Armin grew. Not hunger, something else. The deep stirred faintly in the distance, its cold gaze pressing against him, sensing hesitation. Armin bent his head, pretended to feed, let his wings curl inward to mimic obedience. But instead of devouring, he did something different. He touched the soul gently, not to take it, but to hold it. The man's final breath slipped free, and for an instant, Armin shielded the flickering light within his own chest. The hunger screamed, the fire burned hotter, and he felt the soul's gratitude like a whisper against his being. "Thank you." The deep's voice coiled through his mind, suspicious. "Collect." Armin stiffened, his wings twitching as if in compliance. He released the soul, letting it drift upward into the unseen beyond, free from the eye, free from the mist, free from the deep. The chain slackened. The suspicion ebbed. The deep was silent again. Armin straightened, trembling with the weight of what he had done. He had broken the order. He had stolen a soul not for himself, not for the abyss, but for freedom. And as the ward filled with the dim glow of fading lives, he knew what his rebellion would be. Not to devour, not to obey, but to set them free, even if the deep eventually discovered him, even if every sentinel in the abyss turned against him. Armin moved quietly through the ward, wings folded close, shadows bending around him as though trying to conceal his act of defiance. The freed soul's warmth lingered inside him, not like hunger's fire, but like a hidden ember. It did not fade. It stayed. Every step he took, it pulsed faintly, whispering strength. The hunger inside him shrieked, furious at being denied, gnawing at his core with sharp emptiness. But the ember fought back, steady and patient. Armin clenched his jaw, enduring the torment, refusing to bow. Another bed, another fading breath. A child this time, skin pale, fingers curled loosely around a worn stuffed toy. The soul above the child glimmered faintly, fragile and small, like a star barely born. Armin froze. The hunger roared, desperate to devour. But the ember inside him flared, reminding him of the old man's whisper, the taste of gratitude, the power of release. He stretched his hand toward the child's soul, trembling as he touched its glow. The deep's presence pressed harder now, sensing him again. "Collect." The word was sharper this time, edged with warning. Armin bowed his head, wings folding as though in obedience. But in silence, he shielded the soul. He cradled it gently, like a fragile flame cupped against the wind. The child exhaled one final breath, and instead of pulling the soul into himself, Armin opened a path. A fracture in the veil, a sliver of light. The soul slipped free, drifting upward, vanishing beyond the abyss's reach. The hunger howled. The chains tightened. The fire inside him seared his being, threatening to tear him apart. But the ember blazed brighter, and for an instant, the pain dulled. The deep's voice rumbled across his skull, low, suspicious. "You weaken. You hesitate. You will break if you resist further." Armin lowered his wings, silent, feigning compliance, letting the shadow of obedience cloak his betrayal. But deep inside, he knew the truth. He had freed two souls, and with every act of defiance, the ember inside him grew stronger. Stronger than hunger, stronger than fear. Somewhere in the abyss, the colossi stirred, their hollow eyes turning once more toward him. The deep suspicion was no longer faint. It was watching. It was waiting. The silence of the hospital ward weighed heavily as Armin drifted toward the veil. The freed child's soul lingered in his thoughts, glowing brighter than the fire of hunger ever had. But the air shifted. The shadows thickened. The veil quivered as though something vast pressed against it. Armin froze. The deep was no longer content to only watch. From the darkness between worlds, a shape began to emerge. Tall, silent, wings stretched wide, sharp as obsidian blades. A sentinel. Its hollow gaze burned with the cold light of countless swallowed souls. The chains of the abyss clattered faintly around its form as it stepped closer, its presence bending the air, crushing every fragment of warmth. Armin's chest tightened. The ember inside him flared, but weakly, fragile against the sentinel's vast weight. The being's voice slid into his mind, sharp and without emotion. You hesitate. The hunger inside Armin twisted violently, craving, screaming, demanding he prove himself. The sentinel's wings spread wider, casting shadows across the ward though no mortal eyes could see them. It raised a hand. A thin thread of light appeared in its palm, an unclaimed soul drawn from a dying patient nearby. The soul flickered, trembling, its glow dim with fear. The sentinel extended the light toward Armin. Collect. The command struck like iron across his mind, pressing him to obey, leaving no room for pause. Armin's wings trembled. The hunger inside him writhed in delight, begging to consume. But the ember inside burned hotter, whispering resistance, whispering freedom. If he obeyed, his secret rebellion would survive a little longer. If he defied, the sentinel would know. The deep would know, and the chains would tighten forever. Armin reached his hand forward, shadows curling around his fingers. The soul quivered in the sentinel's grasp, helpless. The ember inside his chest roared, pushing against the hunger, daring him to choose. For the first time, Armin felt the weight of both futures pressing on him at once. Obedience or defiance. And the sentinel's hollow eyes did not blink. Armin's hand hovered above the trembling soul. The sentinel's gaze burned into him, cold and merciless, its silence demanding compliance. The hunger inside him clawed and howled, desperate to consume. But the ember pulsed, steady, insistent, whispering of freedom. Armin closed his fingers around the light. The soul shivered violently in his grasp, torn between two fates. The sentinel leaned closer, its voice echoing in his skull. Fee. The chains of the abyss constricted around him, sharp as iron thorns. Armin lowered his head, wings folding in submission. To any watching eye, it seemed he was obeying. But inside, the ember flared into a blazing fire. Instead of devouring, he shielded the soul, wrapping it in his hidden flame, hiding it deep within himself. The sentinel's hollow eyes narrowed. It studied him, searching for cracks in the mask of obedience. The air grew colder, heavier, pressing in his bones. Again, the sentinel commanded, its hand stretching toward another bed, another flickering soul. Armin clenched his jaw, forcing his wings to bend, forcing his form to appear compliant. The soul drifted free of the body, trembling in the sentinel's grasp. Collect. This time the command cut deeper, sharper, as if the deep itself listened. Armin reached out once more, his chest burning with fire and hunger colliding. He cupped the soul in his hands, shadows curling around it like claws. The ember inside him cried out to protect it, to release it, to free it. The hunger screamed to consume. The sentinel's gaze bore into him, waiting for the choice. If he freed it now, the deception would shatter. If he obeyed, his rebellion would survive another night. Armin trembled, the fire inside him swelling, pressing against the chains until sparks seared his chest. The ward around him seemed to blur, the veil itself quivering under the weight of his indecision. And the sentinel leaned closer, its hollow voice colder than the abyss. You are not empty enough. Armin's hands shook as he held the fragile soul between them. The sentinel's eyes burned into him, cold, endless, merciless. The hunger tore at his chest, shrieking to consume. But the ember inside him roared brighter, blazing like a hidden star. He opened his hands, and instead of feeding, he lifted the soul upward. The veil above cracked open, a seam of light breaking through the abyss. The soul rose, trembling, then vanished into the freedom beyond. The chains of the abyss snapped tight around Armin, cutting deep, dragging fire across his wings. The sentinel shrieked, its hollow scream shaking the ward, its form unraveling into storm and shadow. The deep's voice thundered through him, furious, endless. You defy me. Armin fell to his knees, every shred of power crushed beneath the abyss's weight. But the ember inside him did not die. It burned, brighter and brighter, until his whole being glowed with stolen warmth. The freed souls within him whispered together, their voices rising into a chorus. You are not theirs. You are ours. You are free. Armin lifted his head. His chains cracked. His wings, once shadows, now blazed with light. The sentinel recoiled, its scream torn apart by the radiance spilling from him. The deep recoiled too, its endless voice breaking into silence. For the first time, the abyss trembled, and Armin stood, not as a collector, not as a hollow servant, but as a guardian of what the deep could never consume. He stepped into the veil, leaving behind the broken shadow of his master's command. And in the quiet that followed, the abyss knew fear.